Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Teresa Barch, and I wanted to implement a strategy that engaged my students in interactive discourse. So I chose the Stir the Class strategy from the page 92 of the Go-To Strategies booklet. For those of you not familiar with this strategy, here's a brief synopsis. The teacher poses a question or a problem to students. The students write down their answers to the problem. When the teacher says go, the students walk around the room collecting information from other students. When the teacher says freeze, a new question or problem is posed. This is a process that can be repeated again and again and again until enough engagement is had or enough data is collected. I did have to modify this strategy just a little bit. In the book, Educating English Language Learners, What Every Teacher Needs to Know, the author Nutta states that teachers should do everything possible to provide accessible input, interaction, and output for English language learners. Right now, I have a lot of negative output in the form of bullying. I have 4 students who are not allowed to have any contact with each other due to bullying issues. As I don't want my ESL students to be caught in the middle of this negativity, I modified the strategy just a little. I chose to add a little more structure to this collaborative activity. So what I did is I created 6 collaboration spaces throughout the room where kids could share their ideas. I chose 6 kids to remain as guardians of the collaboration spaces. They couldn't move and they had to keep note of what all the ideas were that came through their station. The 4 who are not allowed to be near each other were made the guardians of 4 certain stations, and then 2 other students were chosen as guardians to remain at those stations. I challenged students to find as many new ideas as they could throughout the time by talking to each other. Modifying this strategy was necessary so I could have peaceful communication throughout the classroom. The activity itself is one normally I do as a think, pair, share activity. We're making endothermic baggies, and students have to predict about chemical reactions and observe chemical reactions. The first question I posed to students was to explain how they know something is reacting or how they know something's having a reaction. Students wrote down their answers and then walked around the room and shared out. When I said freeze, students were then given 3 ingredients and asked which ones they thought were going to cause the chemical reaction and why. They could choose 1 ingredient, 2 ingredients, 3 ingredients, no ingredients, or all the ingredients. They wrote down their answers and started to collect more answers. Positives in this was that there was a lot of oral communication with students. In ESL Teaching Principles for Success, the author cites several studies that show the necessity for output as well as input in attaining proficiency in a second language. The author goes on to quote several studies that show the necessity for interaction with peers for learning language. My students were doing a lot of communicating and using a lot of good academic language with chemicals and reactions and talking about evidence with the chemicals and reactions. There were a lot of ideas that were presented about what might happen, and students shared quite a few out-of-the-box thinking ideas. The kids enjoyed collecting the ideas. They had very specific areas to go to, and that helps some of my struggling learners because sometimes it's overstimulating and overwhelming. So my struggling learners had a place to go to collect information and then another set place to go to collect information. This made it much easier on them. Some negatives was the fact that I couldn't implement this as freely as I wanted to because we have stay away from each other issues. I specifically have certain students that have stay away from each other, and it makes the reality of structure a necessity rather than what I could have had. Some students only collected 1 or 2 ideas and then we're done. I encouraged them as much as I could to collect more ideas, but they said everyone kept saying the same thing over and over again. A few students didn't listen critically to each other, and what they wrote down wasn't as precise as what the other person said, and it kind of changed the meaning of the idea. And we had a long conversation about what the idea was versus what they had written down and whether the 2 were the same. So we need to talk about using more precise language when we're writing down others' ideas. It was a new idea to kids. They weren't used to this format. We've done data collection before, but not in this manner. So I think one of the negatives is that we need to give it more time and we need to get kids more accustomed to it before we just sort of write it off as being unsuccessful. Aspects that I would change about this, first of all, I would always need to look at my group to make sure that my group needs structure or doesn't need structure when dealing with this idea. I would like to use this for math talks. because I think one day a week, this would be a good structure to use for math talks to get kids to talk to each other about their ideas and how they solve problems and how they see problems. I would also like to have kind of a black line master for the data collection, because what I wrote was a master for just the science portion, and that isn't necessarily how it would look or how it would need to look for math. And I think if I can come up with a generic blackline master so then the kids have one form and they know what to do with that form each time, that would be great. Well, thanks for listening to my strategy. You guys have a great day. Bye.